Alright, so I'm just going to cut straight to brass tacks. This video's objective is solely to define each Dyno-stand setting. Before I begin, please keep in consideration that all settings that I share in this video are what I personally prefer to use. All the information that I will be sharing on the Dyno-stand settings individually is from many hours of experimentation and trial and error. You're free to copy my settings, but do not feel forced to strictly use what I use. Please, I beg of you, use what is more comfortable for you. So let's get right into it. The car that I'm going to be using for this is going to be the first car that you get, the Hachiroku, but I have Kino mod, so it makes it the A86. Do not be alarmed. I'm not using any swaps. Um, and I'm going to be using Ultimate Pro for this. Um, these are two of the best ones in the game. The only difference between Ultimate and Ultimate Pro is Ultimate Pro has better stats by default, and Ultimate does not have access to the panel that's right here. There is a weight panel, which is very useful, by the way. So we're going to be doing Ultimate Pro. If you don't have it, you can still get away with Ultimate, but I highly recommend you invest in Ultimate Pro in the future. But let's get right into it, shall we? Whenever you enter the dyno stand, you're greeted with this. We're going to start from suspension. We're going to go to alignment, and then we're just going to keep going, alright? So let's start off from the top down with the front axis. Everything on the front applies to the rear, by the way. But I will show you staggered setups and stuff if maybe you're into that. Staggered setups usually means like one side is stiffer than the other side, but I'll get into that. So spring length. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but there is some importance in this. This value changes a lot depending on your car or what you're trying to do with it. But just for now, let's just worry about fitment, right? So what does our car look like? We might come back to this later once we delve into the tires and stuff. But for now, it's alright. So let's go to the next setting. So suspension stiffness. Now this is the highly personal preference. But if you are a beginner, I highly recommend that you do not experiment with doing one looser than the other until you get a good grasp of the game. But I will just tell you right now what each of them do, right? So when you have more stiffness, let's say for now, like on both of them, right? So like if you have 100, 100. So what you're basically doing is your car will in turn lean less. It would make it a lot more responsive on the initial turn in, and it'll just make it a lot more precise, right? But the only issue is that it may become too sensitive. So you can think of it kind of like mouse sensitivity, or like your input sensitivity rather. That's the best way that I can describe it. The lower you go, the lower the sensitivity. That's the best way to put it. Your car will turn in slower, but it will be more stable. Basically the same effects as using low sensitivity in attack FPS, like CSGO or Valorant, for example. So with that in mind, we're just going to do 100 on each for now. And if anything, I'll switch it, but I think 100 is fine. Now, these settings. I am gonna be completely honest with you. I don't know how I can explain this in a better way. This might have to be a different video because these get very in depth. There's a lot of different setups that you can do with these. But I do recommend that instead of thinking of it as a slider, that you think of it as increments is the best way to put it. So instead of working like this and then just randomly looking for a value, I suggest you start off. By the way, if you want to open this menu whenever you go to change a setting, double click it. So I personally, now this is personally, you can work however you want, but I'm only giving you from my trial and error what is the best. I would highly recommend that you work in increments of 2000. So for now, we're just going to do 2000, and so that it's consistent all around. Keep in mind, these all work on different planes. So this one is how your car leans left and right. This one is after you hit road bumps. So this is the up and down. This is forward and back. And this is your damper pretty much. This is like if you bounce, how much will it restrain it from bouncing? So basic damper. So with that in mind, we're just gonna, for now, I want it to be consistent all around, right? So we're just gonna do 2000. Keep in mind, this works identically the same as this. These are all basically sensitivities of their own. The higher you go, the more reactive. The less you go, the less reactive. This works with all of these. All of these are basically like that until you get to sections over here, right? So with that in mind, let's go to sway bar stiffness now that we got all these, right? So it says it right here what it does, but the best way that I can put it is it's like it's like a volume knob for your sway. So if you want to quickly adjust how much your car sways and you don't want to have to go and mess with your already pre-existing suspension, you adjust this. Which realistically, this is pretty much how it would work in an actual drift car. But for now, there's two ways you can go with this. So as you can see here, it says moving the balance of stiffness to the front increases the grip of the rear axis. Now, once I actually get driving the car, I can kind of show you what it does. But basically, the more that you turn this up, the less sway you're going to have. So the more stiff the car is going to feel going into corners. And then the less that you go, the more it's going to sway. So it kind of has the same effect that spring stiffness does, but it's more towards swaying specifically and not the up and down motion, right? So with that in mind, for now, to keep this as simple as possible, I'm going to do 0. But I highly recommend that you adjust and mess with each of these. And like I said, adjust it by 1000 and try isolating your front and your rear. Try to work on one of them, and then once you feel that your front is good, you can move on to your rear, right? But this, for what I'm trying to achieve, this setup works perfectly fine. So let's move on. Alright, so we're going to start off with cambridge. So cambridge, or camber, is how your car is stance, pretty much. Like, I'm sure everybody that's watching this video knows about the stance community and how people slam their cars and whatnot. So I'm sure you know of what negative camber does and what positive camber does. But if you don't, I'll tell you. So as you can see, the front here is negative. So you can see what it does here. You can see how it adjusts how your wheel sits, right? Basic alignment. The more that you put, the more lateral grip you're going to have, right? Because what you're doing is, I'll get into that in a different video. But for now, I'm just going to keep it very simple for people that are not very savvy on automotives and stuff. The more negative camber you have, the more lateral grip you have. But everything comes at a compromise. So you are sacrificing your straightaway grip. So the grip that you get laterally, you take away the longitude. So, really depends on what your build is, but for mine, I like to keep it pretty close to 0. So, I'm just going to keep it at -3 because I'd say it looks relatively good. Now for the rear, also highly preference. Um, for my build, I want the rear to have a little bit more grip. So I'm gonna have it around 2 as well. Also, I may have to make another video explaining different setups that you can do, but for now, this works. So let's move on to the next one. So, toe. This one is a lot more nuanced of a setting because this is basically the line that your car takes. As you can see, it says it directly affects handling and side changing, right? So it says the higher the rear wheel toe in, the more narrow the trajectory of the drift, right? So with that in mind, let's start with the front here. So this states that it is negative. Um, Personally, what I personally prefer, now this can change with everyone. I know people that have done -1 and they drift perfectly fine. This is highly preference. I recommend that you experiment on this by yourself. Do not use any videos, don't ask anybody, work on this yourself. But this applies for the whole tune also, by the way, so whatever. But for now, I'm gonna do 0, but I'll briefly explain to you what it does. So for the front, if you were to put negative in the front, what you're basically doing is you're making the rear, or not the rear wheels. You're making the wheel go out. So I don't know if it'll bring it up quite well in the video, but you can see that the wheel is turning. So when you make it negative, you're pointing the wheels out. That gives you more lateral grip, but it also makes it less grippy, if that makes sense. It makes it a lot wider of a trajectory, like how it says here, right? For the front wheels, it's fine for it to be negative because it makes it easier to turn, but generally it isn't really good practice to have it that high because it may make the initial turn in a little longer. You don't have as much grip. So for now, we'll just do this. Also, everything that I just said on the negative is exactly vice versa when you turn it up, right? So this is wider, this is narrower. Just to get that out of the way, right? So everything that I just said on the front also applies to the rear, right? So you can make this negative and you'll get less whenever you hit the accelerator, it'll slide out a lot easier with negative, but it'll also make your trajectory way wider if you do like -1. Um, but if you do positive, it'll make it really resistant and hard to drift. Like it won't actually kick out the rear. So I recommend that you find the sweet spot to where it feels comfortable so you can hit your marks and it doesn't feel like hard to drive. But I like to keep it balanced and I usually run 0. Um, but yeah, you could do whatever you want here. If you want, you can cancel out these settings also. You could do like positive here, and then you could do like negative here, and you'd get the benefits of both worlds, but you're canceling out the cons of one another. This is very practical. I do recommend that you try doing this and messing around with the value, but let's move on because I think I've over-explained toe a little bit. So that's all right. That's all right. So caster, this is also highly preference. Um, I will say this as a wheel player. Caster is a lot less of a factor whenever you're playing on controller than it is on wheel. Because if you were to play zero caster, as you can see here, it says the higher this value is, the quicker the steering wheel reacts to changes in direction of the car's motion in a drift, right? So basically what it's saying is the higher that this value is, the more reactive your car is whenever you're drifting per se. Like let's say like you're in the middle of a slide and you let go of your wheel. If you have it all the way up, your wheel will just start flicking around constantly and like bouncing back. If you have zero, it won't move at all. So this is basically just like it's the feedback you get from your front wheels, basically. On controller, if you turn this all the way up, your car will feel a lot more flicky, I've noticed. So for controller players, usually it's a lot smoother to keep it around like from 10 and below. If you're on wheel, anything from 7.5 to 15 feels good. But since I'm on wheel, I'm just gonna do 15. But just feel it out. Feel it out. Steering axis offset. So, uh, you can kind of get what it does here from what it says. It does exactly what the description says, right? Moving the knuckle, or sorry, moving the knuckle backwards allows you to achieve a greater force that returns the wheel to the center point without increasing the caster angle. So basically, if you have this zero and you turn this up, it would basically replace it, pretty much. I personally, I don't use it. I know people who do though, and it's a useful setting, but it really depends on like what you're trying to achieve. So for my goal, I don't really see a point in that for this car, so I'm gonna just leave that. So we're just gonna go to the next one. Feel free to mess with this, but let's go to the steering angle. So this one, thankfully, there's no not really anything too complicated about it. This is your maximum steering angle. Um, Generally, nobody uses anything below 60, and if they do, um, I mean, to each their own, I guess. Uh, Feel free to do whichever you want, but personally, in the lobbies that I drift in, most cars exceed 55 to 60, especially on this map, Red Rock. So I would just suggest for now, unless like you have a specific goal in mind, just crank it all the way up. Now, this one, Ackerman angle, completely different. So this has to do with your steering, and I would sum it up as your sensitivity, because you hear it a lot. If you get into the community, you'll hear of people saying like 100 Ackerman is really difficult, and they recommend using a lower one. Um, it's it depends more on your build, like what type of goal you have with your car. Like if you want it to be really resistant to turn, you would turn this down. Um, and then if you want it to be like really sensitive, you would turn it up. Um, it I would just uh I can't really give you a definitive answer on what to use, but for my build, I'm just gonna use what is comfortable for me. 73. So we're just gonna put 73, and we're gonna move on. Kingpin. Um, it basically does pretty much the same thing as um steering axis offset. I don't really see a point in it for my build. So this is one of those things that I would just kind of like have off. You can experiment with it, of course. Obviously, everything that I give you here is just the experience that I have. In my experience, I don't really use these, so I can't really give you like a benefit of using it. So I just experiment with it, and I enlighten me in the comments if you find anything useful about these, and I'll get back to you. So let's go to wheels now. Okay, so this is a lot more complicated because this is all personal preference. I can't give you a definitive best. I can only give you what is like the meta of like right now, like what everybody uses, right? So that you can just hop in a lobby and you can drift with them. So, um, let's start from the top. Rim diameter. So I'm sure you know, like, oh, he's on 17-inch rims, or that guy's using 21s, and you already know about the diameter of rims, right? Obviously, like the more this goes up, the bigger the wheels get. Um, I'm just gonna tell you the direct effects on the handling here, because this is really vague. The best way that I can describe it is as you go up in rim diameter, the car becomes more resistant, but it becomes much more accurate. So like, for example, on 16s, this car will feel really easy to slide, but it won't have that much grip. Like it won't be able to go that fast. But if I turn this up to like 19s, the car will feel grippy and like hard to accelerate, but it will feel like really accurate. Like it'll feel I don't know. This is a personal preference thing. For this car, since it's smaller though, I'm gonna keep it 16s just for the sake of this car because you know it looks nice on 16s. So I'll just build around it. But this, feel free to mess with this and find which rim diameter feels best for you. Personally, the range that I frequent a lot is 18 to 19 inches. If you go above that, that's a pretty frequent thing that you see in a lot of like community, um, like a bunch of teams use like 20s, 21s on maps like Springstone and stuff. But I'll let you get to that on your own. This is something you just experiment and you find what feels best for you. Well, what I just said basically applies here as well. Um, these basically work basically the same. The thicker you go, obviously the more grip you get, but the car will feel harder to actually start drifting. But you'll have more grip in the long run if you have like thicker tires. Like if I was to put like 300s on this, I'd be a grip meister. But obviously it'd be really hard to drift comfortably like that at all speeds. So I'd recommend if you're newer to the game, try like 215s. 215s are a really solid start and they kind of introduce you to like the different ranges and stuff. You can either go like lower. Personally, the lowest that I've ever gone is like 195s, but I have seen people that did like 170s and stuff. So really just experiment, see what feels best for you and what's easy to drift with, right? You can do staggered setups, like you can have like one bigger than the other, and this is common practice in like real drifting. Um, but I would just if like for the sake of this build, because you know it's a balanced setup, I'ma just keep it normal and just like put these on 215s as well. Um, tire pressure. So this one I have a little bit of a an approach for because so this right here, your pressure is the most important thing to change whenever you switch maps or whenever you're drifting with people that are quicker or slower than you or whatever. This controls your direct grip. Like it's basically like the volume knob of your grip, if that makes sense. So once you dial in all this stuff, only use this to change your grip. This is usually the best way to do it. The less tire pressure you have, obviously, like if you've ridden a bike or you've seen like deflated tires and stuff, you'd know like the lower you go, it's really hard to like pedal. Um, the same thing kind of applies here. You sacrifice your speed for grip whenever you have this lower, and then vice versa when you have it up, right? Um, on other games like Assetto Corsa and other games like that, like simulators, usually it's not best to crank it up all the way like this. But we are on CarX. This game is pretty arcadey, so as a beginner, I'd recommend having this range be higher than your front so that the rear slides out easier. And once you try it out, you'll see it's really, really useful. Um, and if you feel like it's too slippy, you can change it later. Um, so front tire pressure is also very important because this is basically your front grip. This will determine how you turn and how quickly you turn, whatnot. Generally, you should always have this one lower than your back so that your car turns really easily. But this may differ on your build. Like if you want it to be resistant to turning, you would turn this up like around this range so it's like really hard to turn. But basically, whenever you transition and this is higher, your car will transition slower. And it'll feel like forced. It'll feel like your car has to do it that way. Otherwise, you can't turn at all, right? So if you want complete freedom, I would recommend that you do around like 120. So I'd say like 120 to like here, like 60. The lowest that you can go. So around like this range is good, right? I'm just going to do 60 because I'm used to it. But once again, it's your freedom, your tune, do whatever you need to do, right? This this is actually tire adhesion. I don't remember when they changed its tire grip, but the adhesion is basically the higher that you go in the percentage, the more grip you have. But CarX divides each like tire group. So like if you have 120 adhesion and then you try to join a server that's restricted to like 90 adhesion, it would force you to go to 90 to play that server, right? I'm a 90s player personally, but I used to play on 120. 120 on this game feels incredibly fast, but I mean, if that's what you're here for, I can't knock you for it. I mean, do whatever's fun for you. Um, but personally, I use 90, so 90 basically is just like it feels like it's on ice pretty much compared to the other ones. Find whichever one feels nice for you and whoever you drift with. I mean, I guess you could just adjust it to that, right? Wheelbase. So this is the wheel track more specifically. So it's basically like where your wheel sits. This can change heavily dependent on like what your fitment looks like. Right now, this doesn't look good to me, so I'm gonna put it like right there, right? So you just adjust this until it looks nice. It does have a small effect on your like the wider that you go, the harder the car will be able to turn. But it will be more grippy, right? So you can kind of do that. You can do it in whatever way you want, really, but usually it's an aesthetic thing most of the time. So we'll just move on to tire profile. Now this one is also highly preference. This one changes a lot between players, just like tire width and diameter. Um, Basically, what this does is that it changes the thickness of your tire. So how much like how much wall you have on your tire, right? How big the tire wall is. Um, Generally, the main consensus sorry consensus is the lower that you go, it'll make the car feel harder to turn, but it would also make it more accurate and easy to spin out and keep sliding. But the higher that you go, vice versa. It'd be much easier and you'd have more grip, but it turns out to be a lot faster. So this is slower, this is faster. That's basically all you need to know about it. It affects everything. It affects your handling, it affects everything. So usually the range is between like I see a lot of people use like 25 and it can range anywhere from 25 to 40. So it's usually this range for a lot of players. If you're new to the game, I'd recommend 30 because 30 is like the sweet spot. That's like the in between, right? So do with this as you may, of course. Let's move on to tire stretch. As you can see, it's the ratio of rim width to tire width. I don't really mess with this setting. It does affect your handling, but it is not as noticeable as the other ones. So generally, I would just keep this the same on all cars. But I mean, if you find something that feels nice to you, do what you got to do. And yeah, let's move on to brakes. So with brakes, this is also everything in here, of course, is personal preference. But I will say that brake torque is usually the most universal setting because on CarX, if you do anything above this, it's usually too sensitive when you're drifting with people. So I would say anything between like 1200 to 1000 is good enough in a lot of scenarios. Like it'll get you what you need because generally you don't really need to brake that much anyways because I mean you're already sliding. So I don't know. That could just be me. Do whatever you gotta do, of course. Front brake bias. So basically, this is whenever you brake, which one it goes for first, right? So like this is set to 100. So if I was to brake right now, these brakes basically wouldn't even activate. It would only brake on my front. So what this does is whenever you were to like, let's say I slam on the brakes and mine is at 100, right? What that would do is it would lock up my front completely. Now, if I was to do this like this would lock my rear completely. If you did it in the middle, it would evenly distribute the braking, right? So this generally causes the car to understeer whenever you're under brakes, and this one makes it oversteer. So feel out as you may. Personally, I typically enjoy 51 as of more recent, but there's a lot of people that are good with 95. Um, there's a lot of people that are good with 70, 60, whatever you want. Whichever feels the best to keep sliding, like if you can keep your car sliding and you can keep your car controlled under braking, that's all that matters. So this, once again, up to you. Do what you gotta do. ABS, as you know, the anti-lock system, is basically it prevents you from locking. Um, in this game, it also affects how sensitive and how smooth your brakes are. So when you have no ABS, the braking feels very responsive, but once you get over like 70 to 80% braking, the car will lock up on you completely. And this is pretty similar to how it would in real life, obviously. If you're familiar with how brakes compress onto the rotor, then you'd kind of understand what I mean right here. Um, Obviously, when you turn this on, it's going to be vice versa, and you cannot lock. When this is on, I repeat, your wheels cannot lock. Unless, like, you did some funky stuff here, but that's besides the point. When you have ABS on, your car feels a lot smoother whenever you're under brakes, but it is not as responsive as ABS off. That that's all you need to know about this setting, right? So let's move on. Okay, so as you can see, you have the little graph here of your power sheet. This is your torque, this is your power. Alrighty, that's a little too much horsepower, so let's get into that. This first setting right here, this is mainly like a this is like a sound thing, so you don't have to worry about this. So the tune-up is basically like your acceleration. As you can see, it says it's the baseline performance. But it's basically like an overall, like if you want your car to run a little slower or a little higher, you can adjust this. Um, for me, I think that this car usually doesn't have that much giddy up, so I'm gonna just leave it up. So this adjusts, as you can see by the little graph, you can see that it moves the lines. So this is your maximum torque RPM. So basically, whenever you hit this RPM, you hit the maximum torque that your car can give you. So the higher you put it, obviously it's going to take longer for you to get that wheel spin. But the lower you put it, you can basically hit the accelerator really hard and it'll immediately start spinning the tires. I personally, I prefer the latter, but I have noticed that some people like 45 to 5,000 and they tune that way. That's up to you. Do what you gotta do. For me, I'm just gonna keep it lowest, right? This one, among like everybody that I know, is usually maximum. This is the maximum rev limit that your car has. Not really much to say about that. This does change on a lot of cars. Like the RX-7 has, I think, the highest in the game, but I may be wrong about that. So, once again, just crank this one all the way up. Turbocharger, self-explanatory. It's your turbo. You can either choose not to have it or to have it. I tune with it, so I you can turn it off on some cars, but for this car, I'm gonna have to have a turbocharger. So now here's this. Once we get into the horsepower and like the torque ranges, I prefer that you focus more on the horsepower of the car, and this isn't like anything specific. I'm saying this to make it a little bit easier to adjust it. And I'd also recommend you try to do like exact values so you know what horsepower range you like, right? So I used to play on like 350 to like 400, right? But I noticed that 400 horsepower on a lot of my cars didn't spin the wheels enough in a lot of scenarios. So I usually use like 500 on a lot of my cars. But that's up to you and how you do your gearing, because your gearing also influences how quick your car gets up to speed. But I'm gonna be tuning my car to 500 horsepower, just because I'm used to it, and it'd be a lot quicker that way if I explain how I did it that way. But once again, whatever power you want. So let's move on to gearbox. So the first setting right here, this doesn't really do anything. This is more of like a sound thing. I guess if you have like a sequential shifter setup, maybe it does something. I don't know. I don't not too big into that. But differential type. So this is very important. You have four types. You have open, which this is used on most cars. Like if you have like a, I don't know, like a Camry or like a Hyundai or something, the likelihood is they use an open diff, which is used as like basic commuting and stuff like that, like productive cars, right? Spool, I can't really tell you what cars it's used on. It's good for drifting. As you can see, the other ones have values. This one is the only one that doesn't. So if you want something that like you don't have to tweak and it's like plug and play, I recommend that you use spool. Because there's a lot of good players that use spool. It's a really safe differential type. But for my case, I won't be using that. I'll be using something different. The most common differential type is viscous limited slip. This one is this one was like the primary one that it auto selects before open, I guess. I don't know how when it switched, but anyway, the lower this goes, the less your car will lock whenever you're wheel spinning, right? So basically what this does is whenever you are spinning your tires, your differential's job is to either keep the wheels at the same speed, like how quickly they're rotating, or not. So whenever you have it on 0, it does not lock them. They're not the same speed. They change with whatever your car is doing. So like if you throw your car into a corner, the likelihood is one of your tires is going to be spinning quicker than the other, and it will cause the car to like die out and it won't keep drifting. But if you have it at around like 50 or even maximum, it will lock the tires so that it doesn't do that. They'll keep at the same speed and your car will keep sliding. So as you can see, it basically confirms what I just said right here. However, it does say that excessive straightening and deceleration and side changing, but I mean, this can depend on your setup, but generally the best range for this is about 50 to 100. There are some people that use like 15 and stuff, but to each their own. It depends on your setup. This is the one that I use a lot. This one is clutch based. So this one is the most customizable and the most versatile objectively. I would say objectively this is the best differential type in the game. But of course I mean, everybody has their preferences. So I'm just gonna go over briefly what each thing does. So preload is basically the weight that's loaded on your car whenever you enter a corner and such. So this basically, if you have this lower, your car will feel lighter and easier to turn in. If you have this higher, your car will feel more resistant, but it will also feel like it has more grip when you're turning, if that makes sense. So it basically does what it's called. It preloads, if that makes sense. Um, for my setups, I like to keep my cars light in the front, so I usually keep it at 0. But I did used to use 500, so it really do whichever you want. I'm gonna be using 0 for this. Power lock. So so these locks basically determine, as you can see, acceleration blocking and deceleration blocking. So basically, under power is basically it's the same function of this, how this works, except it works on acceleration and deceleration with clutch based. So you can determine, like, if you let off the accelerator, how much you want it to lock each rotation, pretty much. So how fast the wheels are spinning. If you want it to like straighten out the car whenever you let off the accelerator, you'd usually turn this down. If you want it to just keep spinning at the same speed, you would keep this up. Generally, I like to have it so that whenever I let off my accelerator, my car creeps forward. So I usually keep this low. For exaggerated effects, I usually do 0. And for power lock, obviously, if you are drifting, you should always have this up. Otherwise, it's not fun. I'm just gonna I'm gonna let you know that now. It is not fun. All right, so let's move on here. So now gearing. This is something that a lot of people struggle with, right? So I'm gonna break it down in the easiest way. You can put this on any car. It doesn't matter what car. You can transfer your gear setup to any car. Um, but the main thing that you need to worry about is final drive. Final drive, just like how sway bar stiffness is with like the volume thing, right? This is basically the overall. As you can see, it determines the magnitude of the acceleration and top speed. Basically, this is your volume knob of your gears. So the lower this goes, the longer your gears will be, as you can see by the speed change when I do that. And then the higher you go, the more acceleration you have. So the range to play with, now this depends on how long you make these gears, but generally uh, this is preference. I usually start with my first gear at about 2.1. Oops. 2.1, right? Also, don't mind this. I have a reshade thing binded to my period key, so don't mind that. And I usually use a final drive of 3. Now, this can change with whatever you do here, so don't think of this as a rule. These change, but once you have your first gear set, then the rest should follow. So what I'm going to do is I don't want the spacing between each of my gears to be that dramatic. So I'm just going to minus this value by about 0.3, I'd say. 0.3 is pretty good. So that would make this one... No, no, not 0.3, I'd say. I'm going to do 0.2. So that would make this value 1.9, right? Now, I'm going to just do that with each of these. So this one's going to become 1.7. This one's going to become 1.5. This one's going to become 1.3. This one's going to... Oh, well, that one's the same. So you can make these longer. Like, you could do, like, 0.2 on the first one and then 0.3 between these. And you could mess with it however you like. This is just my preference. I enjoy driving like this because it makes it, like, predictable. But that's up to you. You can do whatever you want with that. Next up, uh, these are the only thing that I would say is not self-explanatory here is weight transfer. Um, but we'll just go over each of them, right? So mass obviously is the weight of the car. You can make the car lighter. It'll make the car quicker, but it won't slide as easily. I usually keep it heavier because I don't like to be like a race car. So that's up to you though. Weight transfer. Okay, so they don't really tell you in here like where it transfers, but thankfully you can kind of see like how the car shifts whenever you do that, as you can see. So if you have it set to this, as you can see, the rear dropped when I did that, and make it a little easier to see. So whenever you have it on 47, so when you go all the way to the left here, it loads the rear. When you go all the way to the right, it loads the front. So wherever the weight of the car is primarily is where you'll have the most grip. Um, you can do it on the rear if you want your car to be like grippy in the rear. But I usually like to have my rear end kind of like sway behind the front. So I'm just gonna keep this like that. Okay. As you can see, the center of mass height. So this is basically as it says, you know. I usually keep this low because there's some maps that don't really allow you to have that any higher. Okay, well, I'd say that's about it. So let's try out the car. Well, I'm not really finding any critique with it. Um, So as you can see, if I let off my throttle here, the car will straighten. And that's because of the differential settings that I have on it. But if I just hit the accelerator constantly, it will never lose any of that, right? So it basically allows me to let off my gas to get more grip. And then if I want the car to keep sliding, I just keep holding the accelerator. So like throughout this whole corner right here, I'm just going to hold it right about here. Pretty nice, right? So, um, the only thing that I would say to keep in mind with these cars is they're heavily reliant on your throttle. Um, However, I do recommend that if you are still starting out, try to hold your brake and then drift, kind of like if you're doing a burnout. This will make it a lot easier to kind of feel where your weight is on your car, and overall, it will just improve how you handle it as a whole. Um, but other than that, I'd say job well done.